Shalom everybody, this is Tazara. I hope everybody is doing well. This is going to be a quick video addressing some claims that have been being made for years concerning the skin color of Spanish and Portuguese Jews, which are pretty much the same people when you get into the history. But if you've been around for a while, you've probably been aware of the fact that people from the Israelite community, myself included, have been attacked and slandered for reading old books from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries that describe the existence of Black, Spanish, and Portuguese Jews. We've been attacked and slandered online. We've been the subject of smear campaigns, and the list goes on. We've been constantly accused of misreading or misinterpreting these old books. And we were told that when we read the word black in these books, the writers were not talking about these Jews having a literal black skin complexion like what we see in black or dark-skinned people today. We were told that these Jews were just being called black for a variety of reasons, like they were being called black because they were dark-skinned Europeans, or because the word black was just being used as a way to insult Jewish people by grouping them together with Negroes and comparing them to Negroes. We've pretty much heard it all. Well, today I'm going to show you what an actual Sephardic Jew told me about all of this. Not only is he a Sephardic Jew, but he is also a rabbi, a Sephardic rabbi. Not only that, but he's a black Sephardic rabbi and he has a Ph.D. And for those who don't know, Sephardic just means a Jew with Spanish or Portuguese origins. So let's jump straight into this thing. I'm not going to be taking too much of your time because there's no need to drag this on. So very quickly before we get into what the rabbi said, I want to start this off by referencing just two books very quickly. We're not going to be in them long. We're just going to be taking a quick peek at the relevant parts in each book. And this first book is called A New Voyage to Italy with Curious Observations on Several Other Countries. You can see the whole title here yourself, Volume 1 by Maximilien Misson, published in 1714 Europe. And we're going to be on page 139, it says right here. I'm going to zoom in. We're going to start right here. It says, the Jews at Rome are very poor. Those who are poor are always nasty, and those who are nasty usually stink. That is the mystery. 'Tis also a vulgar error that the Jews are all black, for this is only true of the Portuguese Jews, who marrying always among one another, beget children like themselves, and consequently the swarthiness of their complexion is entailed upon their whole race, even in the northern regions. But the Jews who are originally of Germany, those, for example, I have seen at Prague, are not blacker than the rest of their countrymen. So the reason I bring this book out is because this is one of the main books that Israelites use, in my experience, to demonstrate the existence of black Jews in Portugal. We read it says that the Jews are not all black, for this is only true of the Portuguese Jews. So I'm sure if you've been around, you know people have said, when looking at this source, when I say people, I'm talking about opposers of this type of information being brought out, people who don't like it. They say that black here is not being used to describe a blackness that is the type of blackness that we see in people today. They'll make one of the claims that I mentioned in the introduction. For example, black here is just being used to describe dark-skinned Europeans, or it's being used to insult the Jews by comparing them to actual black people, but the Jews aren't really black. So let's break this down for a second. It says the Jews are all black. If Jews are only being called black as an insult to compare them to Negroes, then why down here does it say, but the Jews who are originally of Germany, those, for example, I've seen at Prague, are not blacker than the rest of their countrymen? You see what I'm getting at? And there are other books that say something similar to this one. It'll say, for example, the Portuguese Jews are black, but the Jews in other locations are not black or they're white. So if black is being used as a way to insult Jews, why are some Jews not being called black? You see what I'm getting at? That's one of the arguments we've been dealing with over the years. It doesn't make sense when you actually examine things and put all of the information together and form a unified context. But anyways, let's jump to the next one real quick. This one is called Sources of History in the Pentateuch, 6 lectures delivered in Princeton Theological Seminary on the Stone Foundation, March 1882, by Samuel Colcord Bartlett, published in 1883. So it's another old book. On page 118. Now, this one demonstrates how that other argument is wrong. The other argument being that the blackness isn't talking about literal black or dark-skinned people as we know them today, but it's talking about quote-unquote dark-skinned Europeans or whatever. Let's see what this one says about Portuguese Jews, black Portuguese Jews. In regard to the human race, it has been shown abundantly and historically that each of the external differences often ceases to be characteristic. Thus, the black color is found not only in individuals as the black Jews of Portugal, but in tribes as the Bacaris on the Red Sea, whose hair and character are perfectly Semitic. All right? So, this writer, and I've gone into all these books before. I'll put links in the description box to other presentations I've did that go further in depth into these sources and all that. But this is just a refresher, just to give some context, and then we get to the point to see what the rabbi, an actual rabbi, a Sephardic rabbi, a black Sephardic rabbi said. But it says the black color is found not only in individuals as the black Jews of Portugal, but in tribes as the Bacaris on the Red Sea. So he's letting us know that the black color observed in the black Jews of Portugal, that same black color can also be observed in the Bacaris tribe. So now we don't have to rely on what people are telling us black means here in this context. We can go look at the Bacaris tribe of people and see what color they are, and then we know that the author is comparing these black Jews in Portugal to the Bacaris tribe of people, right? If we have our thinking caps on, you know, it's just common sense. So I want to jump here very quickly. I know this is a black and white photo. You can see how black they are, but this isn't the photo that I want to show. I'm just showing this webpage very quickly to maybe clear something up that might become confusing to some people. It says Egypt, Bukharan encampment. The Bisharan are a Sunni Muslim tribe of the Beha nomadic ethnic group who live in the eastern part of the Nubian Desert in Sudan and southern Egypt. But the important part here is it says Bukharan here. Like in the book we just read, it said Bacaris, Bukharan, and then it says Bisharan. So these two words, Bisharan and Bukharan, are used interchangeably to describe the same tribe of people. So if we see, or if you look these people up on your own and you see one photo saying Bisharan and one saying Bukharan, it's the same tribe of people. They're one of the major divisions of the Beha people. So now that that's cleared up, let's move on. So as you guys can all see, I've attached the page that we were just reading in the last book that I opened. I've attached it to a photo of a girl from the Bisharan or Bacaris tribe. Let's read this one last time. Thus the black color is found not only in individuals as the black Jews of Portugal, but in tribes as the Bacaris on the Red Sea, whose hair and character are perfectly Semitic. So this is what color the Bacaris people are. And it says, the black color is found not only in the black Jews of Portugal, but in tribes as the Bacaris on the Red Sea. So, like I said, if we have our thinking caps on and we're being honest, we can very clearly and obviously see that black is not being used here metaphorically or as figurative speech or as an exaggeration to describe people who are not black. It's talking about people who actually are black. And the key part here is that the author gives context by describing another group of literal black people who have the same black color as the black Portuguese Jews. All right. So books like this one right here take care of that argument about the Jews in Portugal, the black ones, not being literally black or having black dark skin like how we see in black people today. And like I mentioned earlier, the source that I showed earlier that says the Jews in Portugal were black, but ones in other locations are white, that goes against the argument that Jews were only called black as an insult or to group them with Negroes as a way of degrading them. Because why aren't all the Jews being called black in books like that? Why are just the Portuguese Jews being called black? And I'll show another quick source that speaks to that point right now. And I'll put the link to this one in the description box as well. As you can see in the last highlighted section, it says that this blackness must be in the blood or race, as Marmol argues, can be further proved from this observation made that the Jews of the Portuguese race always marrying one with the other, the children resemble their father's and mother's complexion, and thus this particular tawny color perpetuates itself with little or no diminution, wheresoever they inhabit, even in northern countries. Whereas the German Jews, as for example those of Prague, are as white as most of their German countrymen, which shows what an error most people are in who think all Jews are tawny. So this author is identifying the Portuguese Jews, the black ones, as being black, literally. And then at the bottom of the highlighted section we just read, he says that the German Jews are white. So if Jews were only being called black as an insult, and to group the Jewish race together with Negroes as a way of degrading them, then why are the German Jews being called white? Why are only the Portuguese Jews being called black? Doesn't make sense. Even if there were instances in history where Jewish people or other races of people may have been called black as a metaphor or a figure of speech, and even if there were instances in history where other Jewish people were labeled as black as a way to degrade them, using certain instances and isolated events in history as a blanket dismissal of all other historical records describing Portuguese Jews or any other group of Jews as being black is completely unscholarly and dishonest. I don't know where all the hatred comes from. It's a very irrational argument to make, especially if you're going to slander and attack people while using it. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. I publicly admit I was wrong about certain things, but hey, to each their own. And I also wanted to put on record, as I've said before in plenty of my other presentations, I don't believe all the Portuguese and Spanish Jews were black. And I've been saying that since day one. The point that I've been making this whole time is that the black ones were in fact black, literally. Now, whether or not all the black Jews and all the white Jews in Spain and Portugal were actual descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is a totally different argument and a totally different question. And that would actually be a better argument to make. To say that yes, there were black Jews in Spain and Portugal according to history, but were they descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? But for some odd reason, people don't even like to admit that there were black Jews in Spain and Portugal. So the conversation has never gotten to that point. So now that I've gotten all that out the way, let's go ahead and jump into what this Sephardic rabbi had to say on the matter. Now I want to add in this disclaimer right here to establish the fact that this Sephardic rabbi, this scholar that I'm about to show, does not endorse any quote-unquote Hebrew Israelite beliefs or teachings. I'm only showing him and his input on this topic to establish the fact that there were black Jews in Spain and Portugal and that we are not misreading these old books when we read them. And we haven't been the whole time. We haven't been misreading them at all. So if anyone tries to attribute anything else other than what I'm showing here to this man, and they're lying and they're trying to slander him. The only thing I've talked to him about, and the only thing I've asked him about, the only thing I've asked him for input on is the historicity of black Jews in Spain and Portugal. And that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So I'm sure most of you are probably aware of the Obadiah Alliance at this point, and if you're not, it's all right. This is a Sephardic rabbinate, a Sephardic group of rabbis who recently, I think it was about a year ago, they put out a ruling establishing that the Igbo people of West Africa are in fact bloodline Israelites. This is their leader or president, Yohanatan Eleazar de Mota. Dr. Hakam Yohanatan Eleazar de Mota was born in Miami. He comes from a long line of Sephardic families from Spain, Portugal, and North Africa, which established themselves in the Caribbean before migrating to the United States of America. He began his rabbinic education under Hakam Yosef Ben Arak at the Sephardic Education Center of North Miami Beach, Yor. After that, he studied the laws of Shehita with Hakam Abraham Biton and was certified by Hakam Israel Levi Teitel. Thereafter, he continued his studies under Hakam Mordecai Levi de Lopez. And moreover, H. Eleazar de Mota was certified in Israel as a mohel by Hakam Yoel Nissim Dayan. Apart from his rabbinic studies, H. Eleazar de Mota has a master's degree in anthropology and religious studies from Florida International University and a Ph.D. in international law from the University of Amsterdam. H. Eleazar de Mota is the author of numerous books and articles on Western Sephardic Jewry. He established his Beth Midrash in 2009 in the capital of the Dominican Republic, then in La Romana, in order to strengthen the Sephardic Jewish identity therein. So as you can see, this man is a Sephardic Jew, a Sephardic rabbi, and he is a black man. He's what we would call in America a black man. All right, and who better to go to for some input on this topic than a Sephardic rabbi, a black Sephardic rabbi? And he holds a Ph.D. This is his LinkedIn. You see it's the same man, same name, Yohanatan Eliezer Demota, Ph.D. You go down to his About section. It says, I am an anthropologist, rabbi, and scholar of religion and international law with a primary research focus on religion and legal history in Latin America and the Sephardic diaspora. I recently worked on projects related to the legal contributions of the Sephardic Jewish community in the 17th century Dutch Republic on the debate on slavery and slave trade. In addition, I studied the phenomenon of identity construction and religion of the descendants of Iberian conversos around the world. Iberian conversos were Jews from Spain and Portugal who gave up their Jewish faith and converted to Christianity. Prior to my career in academia, I was an IB mathematics and science teacher from 2009 to 2014. Overall, I have a knack for taking difficult and abstract concepts and simplifying them. I derive satisfaction from this. And very quickly, I want to jump back to the Obadiah Alliance website that we looked at a few moments ago. He has a letter of endorsement here, or a letter of recommendation. Before we read it, I want you guys to see that it's signed right here by Tudor Parfit. This is Tudor Parfit. I'm sure a lot of you guys already know who he is. He's one of the world's leading voices when it comes to mainstream Judaism. Tudor Parfit is a British historian, writer, broadcaster, traveler, and adventurer. He specializes in the study of Jewish communities and Judaizing communities around the world, particularly in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, and the development of issues about the construction of race. Tudor Parfit, this is his Wikipedia page. We just read this top part right here. Parfit is an emeritus professor of modern Jewish studies in the University of London at the School of Oriental and African Studies, where he was the founding director of the Center for Jewish Studies. He is now Senior Associate Fellow at the Oxford Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies. Let's jump down right here. You don't have to read all this. Let's just get the key points. He's a Fellow of the Royal Historical Society in the United Kingdom. He was appointed Distinguished Professor at Florida International University in 2012 and Distinguished University Professor in 2018. He is Alumni Fellow at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard College. In 2011, he gave the Nathan Huggins Lectures at Harvard College, which were published by Harvard University Press. All right, so I say all that to go back to this letter of recognition or letter of endorsement signed by Tudor Parfit for Yohanatan Eliezer Demota. Dated March 7, 2018. To whom it may concern, Rabbi Yohanatan Eliezer Demota, M.A., has specialized as an ethnologist in the study of populations with a Jewish background in the Caribbean. He specialized in this. Currently, he is active in a number of areas with respect to the Spanish and Portuguese Jewish diaspora. I supervised Rabbi Demota during his graduate work at Florida International University. I witnessed how he developed expertise in utilizing various tools, including historical records, genetics, genealogies, oral traditions, and Jewish law to determine the Jewish origins of a particular community. Throughout his work, he demonstrated appropriate academic rigor. Rabbi Demota has the unusual distinction of being able to employ science, history, and halakha, which is Jewish law, to assist him in arriving at his findings. He has a very considerable knowledge of many aspects of contemporary Sephardi or Sephardic Jewry. Thank you sincerely, Tudor Parfit. So we can see that this Sephardic rabbi is an expert on this topic that we're dealing with. He has a PhD. Who better to ask than him? So let's end this presentation by looking at what he said when asked about the historicity of black Jews, literal black Jews in Spain and Portugal. You can see this is dated June 2nd of 2022, over a year ago. Me to him. I said, Shalom, Rabbi. I have a quick question for my research that I hope does not offend. I said, I hope it doesn't offend him because I'm asking if Jews from Spain and Portugal were black, and he's black from Spain and Portugal. So, I didn't want him to think that I'm stupid or something, but I wasn't asking this for me. I was asking for other reasons that I explained earlier in the presentation, but he doesn't know all that. I just straight up asked him without explaining why I was asking. So I said, "Shalom, Rabbi, I have a quick question for my research that I hope does not offend. Were there other black Sephardic Jews who looked like you and I that were expelled from Spain and Portugal? Or was it only white Jews?" Now, back when I asked him this question, I had a photo of myself up. I don't anymore. So he knows exactly what I look like. I'm about the same skin tone that he is, same features, somewhat for the most part. I'm a black man, so-called African American. He responds, and this is what he says to me. "Shalom. Firstly, I was not alive in 1492 or 1497. Neither were my parents nor grandparents. Secondly, I had grandparents who were white and others who were black and brown. There are surnames which indicate the dark skin color of a Sephardic ancestor: Bocanegra, Prieto, Negron, Pardo, Moreno, Pellegrino, Moro, Mora. Sephardic Jews in the 15th century were not all black, nor brown, nor white. This construction of skin color did not begin to become an issue until they had established communities in the New World and amid the context of Atlantic slave trade. Even then, some Sephardic Jews took sub-Saharan African wives and had children with them. See the book Forgotten Diaspora by Peter, Mark, and Jose Horta da Silva. Also, read my book, Natal Legal Consciousness. You can find it on Amazon." And that's what he said. You can see down here I respond to him. This is the important part right here. Sephardic Jews in the 15th century were not all black, nor brown, nor white. So he's saying Sephardic Jews, Spanish and Portuguese Jews, in the 15th century, during the time the Inquisition was going on, were not all black, were not all brown, and they were not all white. So anyone who is saying that Sephardic Jews during this time period in Spain and Portugal were all white, and that when we read about them being black, it's talking about white ones for whatever reason, whether it was whether the books were calling them black to degrade them and compare them to Negroes when they weren't really black, or whether people say that they were being called black as a metaphor because they had tan skin. Both of those arguments are completely wrong. He's saying right here, Sephardic Jews in the 15th century were not all white. Were not all white, they were not all brown, and they were not all black. They were not all one color. So when we read old books talking about black Spanish and Portuguese Jews, it's because they were really black, like how we've been saying the whole time. When we read about them being white, they were white. There were white ones as well. There were also brown ones. So like I said, I felt like a complete idiot having to even ask him this, because obviously he's a black Jew from Spain and Portugal with roots in Spain and Portugal. He's Sephardic. But sometimes, you got to take one for the team. I'm sure if I explained to him why, actually I did explain to him why I asked this later on in the conversation, but, still, like, it's just completely ridiculous that this even had to go this far. I know this was over a year ago, and I'm just now bringing it out, but, come on. But yeah, I'm not using his words here to say that he believes in what Israelites believe, or that he's a Hebrew Israelite, or that he supports everything else we say. This was just a simple question about the historicity of black Jews in Spain and Portugal. That's all I'm using this for. I'm not saying he endorses anything else that I believe or teach, that anyone else from the Israelite community believes or teaches. This was just me asking a scholar a simple question that most of us already knew the answer to. But I think I'm going to just leave things right there. Peace and blessings to you all, and shalom.